they're desperately looking at this glass of water with like 3 drops left in it and trying to convince us that it's somehow full or at least half full. Um, and I just don't think anyone's buying it anymore.
So what you're saying is our beloved republic has been taken over by madmen. Hey, what's up, you guys? Welcome back to yet another episode of Zillennial Money. I am always the world's greatest podcast host. My name is Andy. And why don't I toss it back to you guys for to introduce yourselves for audience members who might be new.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Dominic here. So please be sure to leave, like, comment, and subscribe to our channel and our Clips channel too as well. And let's get things started.
Hey guys, Tristan here. We've got a great show lined up for you today, so I'll throw it back to Andy to take it away.
Yeah, we got a great show for you guys indeed. This is the mega episode, the most exciting week in Canadian politics in a long time. And I think I see Tristan kind of smiling. He knows what we're going to talk about before we even begin the story. So yeah, why don't we not waste any more time and let us begin. So the first story, actually, I only prepared 2 stories for tonight, but the first story, because it's so big, I had to break it into several parts. So, bear with us as we go through it in detail. But yeah, as you guys have probably already guessed, the big story, the first story of tonight is, of course, the Toronto St. Paul's by-election. Yeah, this was tonight is going to be all red meat for me, basically, because you guys know how much I love talking about politics, and this is the most exciting week in Canadian politics in a long time. So the Toronto St. Paul's by-election, it's for those of you who maybe you're not from Ontario or you're not from Canada even, just let me give a brief explainer on how kind of Canadian politics and the structure works, right? So in Canada, we have a parliamentary system. So it's a parliament made up of MPs. So MP stands for Member of Parliament. So each MP represents a district. And then I think there's 338 MPs or seats in the parliament in total. And the political party with the most seats gets to select their leader, and that leader becomes the prime minister. So in a sense, that's how it works. So right now, it's the Liberals who have the most amount of seats, and the leader of the Liberals is the current Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. As some of you may have heard or seen here and there, the Liberals are not doing very well in the polls right now. And this Toronto by-election, what happened was, in this particular area in Toronto, the MP who was like representing that district, St. Paul's, she retired. And when an MP retires or dies in office or whatever, or they just need to be replaced, there's an election, but just for that district. So it's called a by-election, right? So that's what happened in Toronto St. Paul's. Now, just to give a little bit of background before I explain kind of what happened with the by-election that occurred this week, this district is in pretty much like downtown Toronto, like a little bit north of the heart of Toronto, but it's like in there, right? And this district has not elected anyone else besides the Liberals for the past 30 years. So yeah, the last time there was a person of another party that represented this district, I wasn't even born, right? So this is the first time in my lifetime that, let's look at the results, right? So the CPC, Conservative Party, they won the district. They won this by-election with 42.1% of the vote. And this came ahead of the Liberal Party, which only won 40.5% of the vote. So the person who won, his name is Don Stewart, and he kind of ran his campaign on this message of, like, a lot of things are broken and people are unhappy and crimes are going up in Toronto. Let's fix it, right? And just to give you an idea of how big of a margin change this was, I believe that this was a district that the Liberals won in the 2021 election by like 24% or something like that. Like they got 24% more votes than the Conservatives. And so the Conservatives were in a distant second in 2021. And there was a lot of like speculation on, because I don't think Conservatives were actually expecting to win. Like they were talking to the campaign managers for like one of the, like I think the campaign manager for Pierre Poilievre, who's the leader of the Conservatives, like for the whole Conservative Party. And she was like visiting the district and giving like speeches and trying to show her support for Don Stewart, who is the candidate in this district. And she was saying how, if they were like, she didn't expect to win. And if they just got close, like if they lost by like, 5% or even like 10%, that would still show a massive boost in the poll numbers for the Conservatives, and it would show a massive increase in support. But yeah, obviously a lot of people weren't expecting the Conservatives to win, but they did. So let's scroll down to the second picture, and you can see that this is a map of the current kind of breakdown between the districts of Toronto, and the only one that is blue is St. Paul's, Toronto, right? The by-election that just happened. Literally every single other district you can see in the like immediate Toronto to North York region, they're all Liberals everywhere. Again, St. Paul's was a safe Liberal seat, quote unquote safe, or they thought it was safe for the past 30 years, and this is no longer the case. So many pundits were saying that this election is really a referendum on what people think of Justin Trudeau, and obviously people are not satisfied with Trudeau right now, and they want him to resign. Basically, they want him gone, or they just want an election in general. But despite this loss, Trudeau has rebuked those claims and refused to step down. And we can talk about that in more detail later. But maybe the last piece of kind of data that I wanted to provide you guys before we jump into the second part was that if you guys recall, back in 2011, so this was the Stephen Harper versus Michael Ignatieff, who was the leader of the Liberals at that time. Stephen Harper was the reigning prime minister, who was the leader of the Conservatives, right? Versus the NDP's Jack Layton, who was a very well-liked leader and like probably the most popular leader of the NDP of like all time. I don't know about all time, but like of recent history at least, right? So that election really shook things up. And Michael Ignatieff, the leader of the Liberals at that time, he was very not well-liked. And he led the Liberals to one of the worst defeats in modern history, right? I think they only won like 20-something seats in the entire country. But despite how poorly Michael Ignatieff performed, he still won St. Paul's in 2011, and Justin Trudeau just lost it. So this just goes to show the gravity of the situation and how like completely shocking and abnormal this was for the Conservatives to not only stand a chance of winning this district, but actually doing it. And I'll say one last thing. I was watching this election as the results were coming in, and they were really slow to count the votes, by the way. So like they were counting like all the way till like 3 or 4 a.m. and I couldn't stay up any longer because I had work the next day. So I was like, I got to go to sleep. And like when I first started watching, I think it was like 10 or 11 at night when the results first started kind of streaming in, the Liberals were leading by like 10%. And I was like, okay, if the Conservatives can get in within 10% of like, if they could lose by less than 10%, I would call that a win for the Conservatives. And then like the Liberal, like, campaign people, when they were interviewing them, because I was watching the news and they were interviewing them at the campaign headquarters, they were like, yeah, like, we expect to win, but we understand that the Conservatives are coming like up and coming in the polls, and if we can win by 10%, I think that's good. I think that's still like a little bit concerning, but I think it's bearable and it's understandable, right? And that was kind of the narrative at 10 o'clock, right? And by the time that like midnight rolled around, I think at that point it had gotten to like within 5% of a difference between the liberals and the conservatives. And then the conservatives were like jumping up and celebrating. It's like, oh, we almost won St. Paul's. Like, look, we came in within 5%. This is amazing. Like, you know, we lost by 25% last time. We came within 5% this time. Like, people are mad at Justin Trudeau, blah, 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 right? And by the time I went to sleep, and this was like 3 a.m., the conservatives were like trailing the liberals by like around 2% or like 1 to 2%, something like that. And I was like, okay, they're gonna lose, but only by a margin. And I think that is still gonna count as a win for the conservatives. And then by the time I woke up, the conservatives won by like 1.5%, right? So this just goes to show like how crazy this situation is. And again, I keep on repeating myself, but I can't help but emphasize once again that this was absolutely a shocking victory. So before I move on to the second part of the story, I think I've given enough background on this situation now. And now let me toss the question back to you guys. So there's not really it's not really a major question. I just kind of wanted to get your reactions to it. What do you guys think about this situation? Just kind of like, top of your head thoughts. Who wants to take it away?
Yeah, no, I'll take it away, I guess. So in like a span of decades, I think this is completely nuts for something of this scale to actually happen, for a complete like switchover over a city of Toronto, which is majority like liberal, to be able to go into the conservative space is completely nuts for sure. I think it just shows the gravity of the entire situation of our home and native land of Canada. And I think I heard that Justin Trudeau is still currently trying to campaign for his prime minister position, but it definitely doesn't paint a really good picture for him. So in the coming days moving forward towards the election next year, I think he has to definitely watch out. And I guess he could try to do whatever he can to like save himself, but it seems like this is a conservative majority shift over, and it's going to be hard to recover on his end. So we'll see and wait for what is to happen next.
Yeah, before I toss it to Tristan, let me just add one thing, right? So I know we have some American viewers who may not understand Canadian politics well enough. So let me put an analogy like for America, right? This would be like if if there was a by-election in downtown San Francisco, and then somehow the Republicans won that district in downtown San Francisco. Like that is like kind of the American equivalent of that. And again, like if I were to say to you, if the Republicans came within 5% of winning a district in downtown San Francisco, you would already say that is nuts, right? But this is the result that we just witnessed in Toronto St. Paul's, is that the Conservatives won, which means that the equivalent of that would be like if the Republicans actually won a district in downtown San Francisco. So like that's just kind of just to put things in perspective. Let me toss it to you, Tristan.
Yeah, I think it's pretty apparent to me that the Liberals have lost the confidence of the Canadian people. And I think that this is a pretty obvious indicator of that fact, with the Liberals losing such a safe seat. And I understand that they some of the interviews and stuff have been like, there's no such thing as a safe seat, but there are certainly seats that are safer than others, right? So the fact that they lost so aggressively was not a good look for them, and it really emphasizes the fact that the Liberals have not got our confidence, or at least the majority of the people in the country's confidence anymore, and that the coming election will likely lead to a change in leadership between the two parties, as I think we were kind of all expecting. But I think it's pretty clear to me that that's what's upcoming.
So maybe maybe I should save this question for later, but maybe I should also just ask it now. So uh, I was planning on saving this for later, but Tristan, do you think that there's anything that Trudeau can do to redeem himself at this point? Like if you were Trudeau and you wanted to stay on and you're just like looking for options, like do you really have any options, or what would you do? Or is there a pathway that you could see him like clinging on to power after the next election?
To redeem himself, like in terms of the eyes of the Canadian people, I don't think there's much he can honestly do, because I think that the Canadian people have pretty much just gotten sick of him, and it's pretty clear that, you know, regardless of his performance, even that people are generally disgruntled with the length of service that he's had, and the fact that the country has gotten worse during his service, right? So I would say that regardless of whether or not he tries to bribe them with a UBI or something to that effect, I don't see how he will be able to convince enough people to not go with their "I'm sick of Trudeau, I'm not voting for him," and you know, I think that he doesn't really have much of a chance on that front. And I think that the best that he could hope for is if they did do something that was able to convince people to vote Liberal again, that maybe they could prevent the Conservatives from getting a super majority and instead get a majority, or maybe even a minority. But honestly, I don't really think the Liberals can do much. And I think that the NDP have basically placed themselves in the same basket as the Liberals, which means that I don't see them doing particularly well either. So from that perspective, the cons are really well situated to take it in the future. And I just don't see Trudeau convincing anyone to, or not anyone, but convincing enough people to vote for him regardless of what he does, because I think that everyone's just sick of him. And even if swapping to the Conservatives won't improve the country, I don't think that most people are inclined to keep Trudeau in, given his track record of the country declining while he's been in power, right? So I think that, you know, regardless of how much of that is his fault, or it is or isn't his fault, I think that it's difficult to convince people to keep voting for a leader who has not improved their life whatsoever, and in fact made their lives worse.
Yeah, good points. Dom, do you have anything you want to say? Like, what do you think Trudeau can do to possibly try to redeem himself, or is there nothing he could do?
I feel like it's more so like there's probably nothing that he can do, because I think he's had like about like a decade of just bad history and, you know, like bad decision making, etc. And it would be pretty hard to compensate in like 1 year's time for all the bad efforts that he's done before. And like what Tristan said before too, people are just sick and tired of him. And if PP gets elected, and then there's nothing he can necessarily do about his current situation, I think people are just tired of him, or JT in general. And then, yeah, people just want change in general. And to add to, I'd say like Toronto's like an extremely liberal place. Like there's like gender inclusive washrooms, you know, like at Yorkdale Mall, and like at TMU University, that's what you call it now. Like if you're going through the city of Toronto, it's very liberal based. But to have this like you know, political switch in the city of Toronto is a huge thing for sure as Torontonians. But obviously Tristan and I moved to Calgary, but this is coming from like local Torontonians, well, in the suburbs, but still we get the understanding of the landscape, and Andy can agree too. So
yeah, I mean, I'm like, I never lived in downtown Toronto for like long periods of time, but you know, like I live relatively close, I would say. So St. Paul's is definitely like an area that like I've been to, and there's like, you know, a lot of stuff going on there. So yeah, I mean, I would agree with Dom that it's like if everything was normal, like they would win, like the Liberals will win there by quite a large margin, right? Maybe like 25% is like considered normal, 20% is also normal, right? Like even if they only won by like 15%, I would say that they like underperformed in like a normal time. So like to lose this seat is just, it's just pretty crazy to think about it. But on that note, actually there is one more thing that I wanted to bring up before we move to the second part of this story, which is a question, right? And the question is, do you feel bad for the Liberal MP candidate Leslie Church, who lost this riding? Because, you know, like a lot of people were kind of, I don't know, like kind of analyzing the background of Leslie Church, and, you know, trying to analyze why she lost. And you know, her background is she's like one of the staffers of Chrystia Freeland. So, you know, she had a helping hand in crafting a lot of the economic policies and the just policies in general, that because Chrystia Freeland, not only is she the deputy prime minister, she's also the finance minister, right? So like she's occupying both roles at the moment. And deputy prime minister is kind of like the vice president, if you're watching from America and you don't know what that means. So yeah, she's kind of the chief. Imagine like the secretary of the treasury, and also the like vice president mixed in one. So that's how powerful Chrystia Freeland is right now in the Canadian government. And Leslie Church, who's the candidate who lost, she's one of the staffers for Chrystia Freeland, who helped her craft a lot of these policies, which have proven to be extremely unpopular, right? So a lot of people were saying that, you know, like, again, I'm not trying to attack Leslie Church, right? This is not personal. This is just, you know, what I've seen and what I've heard, right? Like a lot of people are saying that, you know, these types of bureaucrats are the exact kind of people that we want to push back against, because they're the people that have at least had a hand in crafting these policies that are, you know, taxing people for using energy, taxing people for like capital gains, and, you know, taxing people for Netflix, all this stuff, right? So yeah, I mean, do you feel that played into kind of why she lost? Is that like part of the reason, or you know, do you think that that's overblown, and do you feel bad for her?
I don't think I necessarily feel bad for her particularly, you know. In my experience with these elections and politicians in general, I don't think anyone really cares very much about their candidates. Maybe some people do, but by and large, you know, in my opinion, like 90% of people are voting based on the party. And so I don't think that it's necessarily that she lost the election in the sense of the Liberals lost the election, right? So I think that it's you know, it sucks for her obviously, but you know, it's not really. I'm sure she'll find something else to do, or I'm sure she'll be back running in the future, right? So either way, I don't think that this is that big of a deal long term for her, but I think it's definitely a loss for the Liberals, and I don't think that her working with Freeland, etc. I don't think that really plays much into her winning or losing. I think the people just genuinely just thought like, oh, the red party, oh, the blue party, oh, the orange party. So yeah, I would say that's kind of my opinion on it.
I think I also kind of agree with Tristan there. I think people are so focused on just trying to survive with the cost of living nowadays and everything being so expensive. So I think by like generalization, people would just see like, oh, red or blue. Let me pick like this color, and then they'll pick this color, and then that's about it. I'm sure like maybe the relationship and like that situation has something to do with it by like a small scale, but I think on a general big scale, it's probably just people wanting a political shift, and then that's about it. So yeah.
Yeah, sounds great. And why don't we move on to part two of the story? Because I actually had something prepared for this. And this is more on the reactions to the Liberals losing this seat, right? So I told you guys to watch this clip of Mark Holland, who's the health minister, the Liberal health minister, who is one of Trudeau's friends, I guess you could say. And he went on TV to defend Trudeau's loss of this 30-year-old district. And the interview is a little bit long, and I'm not actually going to play it because, to be honest, he doesn't really say anything that's even remotely useful or helpful in this interview. Maybe that's my personal opinion, but hey, whatever, right? There's going to be a lot of personal opinions said later on in this episode. But basically, he was kind of trying to brush off these questions on whether or not Trudeau should resign, and he's like, no, Trudeau shouldn't resign. He's doing really well. Look, under Trudeau, we've accomplished so much, and he's done so well. And this by-election, it was just kind of a fluke, and the Conservatives lied, and the Conservatives are trying to fan up support from their supporters and trying to tap into the anger, blah blah blah, right? That just pretty much sums up his entire point. So I did write a tweet in response to this, but before I share my tweet with the audience, I told you guys to watch this this interview as well. So I'm not sure if you guys had a chance to watch the whole thing, but just what did you take away from this, and how do you react to what Health Minister Mark Holland had just said?
Yeah, so I'll take it away here. So I was watching it this morning for a bit, and I probably got through about 75% of it just because it just seemed a bit ridiculous to me overall. But what it seemed like to me is this health minister I think he's from Windsor. I could be mistaken, but that's all what I remember. But he just seemed like him and Trudeau got suspended in school for something, and then he's just trying to defend his buddy Trudeau from all the bad things that he's done. And I think there's a point in the video where he's pretty adamant on supporting Trudeau. He's like, "Oh, I think my vote is still in the Trudeau direction." So obviously there's a bit of biasness, so to speak. So I think he's not necessarily talking in the position of Canadians. He's just talking in the position of just defending his buddy. And I don't know if that's how you should be doing things, but to me, this whole interview kind of seemed like that. And there were certain instances where it got a bit aggressive. You guys should check out the video, but that's just how I interpret it. It's just protecting his buddy, pretty much. So yeah.
Yeah, I'll link the interview down below in the description for our audience members who are interested in watching the full thing, so that you can make sure we're not just making things up, right? You can watch the interview yourself and react to it yourself. But let me toss it to Tristan first before I share my opinion.
When I was watching it, it just sounded like he was towing the party line. He was just, the party says I should be with Trudeau. Trudeau's our leader. I should just always support Trudeau. Whatever Trudeau says is the best. If I don't support Trudeau, I'll get kicked out. So if I don't think that there is an ounce of real consideration from his own perspective going into it. And I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but from what I can see, and this is just my opinion, I would say that he's just speaking from the party line. He's just going, the party is behind Trudeau. I am behind Trudeau. I cannot deviate from the party line, or else I risk my job and my place, my role, my health minister status. So he doesn't, and I think this is kind of why a lot of these politicians who are cheering for Trudeau and talking about how what a great job he's done and all this, it's very much like they're desperately looking at this glass of water with 3 drops left in it and trying to convince us that it's somehow full, or at least half full. And I just don't think anyone's buying it anymore. So they're really just I just feel like they're really just speaking from the party. I don't think that they're necessarily representing the people who are under them particularly well. And I think that that's something that is just a problem with our political system in general, that politicians are not necessarily very incentivized to represent their the people who voted for them very well, if at all, or the people that they should be representing very well. So I think it's just I don't think that there was anything surprising in what the health minister said. I just I don't think that there was anything really of substance for general consumption. I think it was just the same old the party told me to say Trudeau's good, therefore I'll say Trudeau is good.
So what you're saying is our beloved republic has been taken over by madmen. Yeah, that was a meme that Tristan sent me the other day. It was very true, right? It was like the Roman, like, you know, was it Caesar or whatever, a Roman general, right?
It was a Roman.
Yeah, I mean, I think about the Roman Empire every day, by the way. So it hit me right in the heart of the matter. So anyways, yeah, Dom, you were saying how you watched was it like 75% you said of this interview? So if you did, then you got farther than me, because I could not make it 75% of the way through, right? So okay, here's my tweet, and I'll share it with the audience right now. And you guys can, I'll read aloud what my like first initial reaction after watching this video was. So I said, I tried to watch this whole interview of Health Minister Mark Holland defending Trudeau's loss of a 30-year-old supposedly safe Liberal seat in St. Paul's, Toronto, and I just couldn't finish watching the interview. The way Mark Holland reacted is absolutely disgusting and disrespectful to every single Canadian in this country. You can hear the disdain and malice in Holland's voice as he cannot come to terms with the loss of the St. Paul's seat. He goes on and on bragging about how good of a job that him and Trudeau have done, and is spiteful that Canadians still voted against his party. It strikes me as a tone of, how dare you all vote against the Liberal Party, the greatest political faction on earth. It is not possible for one to be more delusional than Mark Holland. I'm greatly concerned that him, along with other Trudeau ministers, cronies, who all hold the highest offices in this country, so callously put their personal loyalty to Trudeau and the Liberal Party above the interests of the country that they serve, right? So again, I know the argument is that, you know, all politicians to some extent put their party before the country at different times, right? And I understand that. However, what I am saying is that right now there's a lot of issues in this country, let's just say, right? And the people who are, you know, like a lot of these crises, a lot of these issues are the result of bad policy. And the people who are in charge, who are making these bad policies, are not kind of listening to the people and not learning their lesson, right? So they make one bad policy after another, and instead of making the situation better, they're just making it worse. And then when people push back against them, they're like, oh, how could Canadians be so mad, right? I was doing such a great job. I was trying to help them, and they're pushing back against me, right? Like they're trying to like stop me from achieving the greatest vision and pushing us towards a utopia and, you know, accomplishing like our vision, right? So it's just, yeah, I think like, I don't know if Mark Holland really believes the stuff that he's saying, or he's just putting on an act. If he does believe the stuff that he's saying, then he's absolutely delusional. If he does not believe the stuff that he's saying, then that means that he's, you know, actively putting the interests of his own party, of his own job, above the interests of the Canadian people, right? Because that would mean that he knows that these policies that Trudeau have implemented have made the situation worse, and he's still trying to defend Trudeau instead of, you know, pushing back against Trudeau for you know, the good of the whole country, right? So I think, Dom, you put an analogy, like you put this in an analogy perfectly. You're like, you know, if people, like if there's two friends, two high schoolers, they got one of them got suspended, and then the other friend, instead of, you know, saying that, oh yeah, like my friend did a bad thing, he shouldn't have, like, you know, destroyed like the you know, classroom, or like, I don't know, spray painted all over the place and vandalized the school. instead of saying that, he's like, oh yeah, like vandalizing school is good, you know, like he gave the like wall a new fresh coat of paint and it looks much better now because the wall was boring before and now he's like graffitied all over it and now it looks better, right? Like he's trying to find all these like ways, and by doing mental gymnastics trying to find all these ways to say how like, no, you're wrong. Like our prime minister is actually good. If you can't put food on the table, then like it's your fault. And you, how dare you vote against me, right? The prime minister was gonna help you solve this problem, and you just voted against him. So like, boo-hoo. Why did, like, that's why you don't have any food, and that's why you can't afford stuff, right? Like, it just kind of, I know that's not exactly what he said, but it just kind of came off like that, right? And it's like they're not listening to the people. They're not listening to, even after this loss, they're not listening to the people. So I think this is going to make the Liberals lose even harder when it's like a national election where every district votes, right? If they can lose St. Paul's, then again, no seat is safe and they could theoretically lose any seat. And it looks like they're going to lose a lot of seats because they're not listening to the voters' problems, right? So let me just kind of toss a question back to you guys and let you guys respond to kind of what I tweeted, or any other things that you want to respond before I move on to the next story.
Yeah, like a final like kind of response off of what you said. Like, I was like, tapping into it. I'll like restate it in a way, I guess. Yeah, he was sounding extremely aggressive, like in how he was speaking. Like, I totally get the part where you're saying like, oh, like you guys are ridiculous. Like, I don't know why you guys are possibly voting this way and thinking this way. And I did get that like enunciation in his tone and like how he was portraying it in the interview. The interview was really aggressive at some certain points, and yeah, it's just total defense of his buddy. And I don't know if that's necessarily the right thing to do, but I do agree with like your tweet and stuff. Like it did like feel of like what I said and like what you said, everything is about right. Yeah. Like I definitely do not disagree with you in any such way. So yeah.
I would say that it's clear that Mark believes that he is right and that that the Liberals deserve to win that seat and the Conservatives did not deserve to win that seat, and that he can't understand why anyone would vote for the Conservatives over the Liberals. That's kind of the sense that I got from his tone, and the whole kind of disregarding the concern of like a future like the effects that this kind of signals with how a safe-ish seat for the Liberals being lost to the Conservatives, like that's kind of a big deal. And he seemed to be kind of blowing that off and being like, oh, it's not that big of a deal, you know, Trudeau's still the greatest thing on the planet, and you know, the Libs are still gonna win everything. So it's yeah. I don't know if I like, Andy tends to use some pretty aggressive language when he's referring to these kind of scenarios. I think that I tend to be less aggressive in my my tone towards these politicians, because in my opinion they are all kind of self-interested, and him towing the party line is very much, in my opinion, more so him being self-interested rather than anything else. And you know, I can see the argument for that. Obviously he should be representing the people that are in his riding, etc. But the way our political system is set up, there's no incentive for him to do that. And there's a lot of incentives for him to you know, stick with the party and speak the party line, because obviously, as we can see, he's health minister, which is a higher up role than other roles in and then like a normal MP. So he's clearly got a higher up role, a cabinet role, as a result of him being a good liberal. So I think that it's not that I think that Andy's wrong that the way these party members, the cabinet members, ministers, whatever, MPs, kind of hold the party line, how they should actually be representing the people in their writing, etc. It's more so that I just think that our entire system is broken. So it's kind of like a question of I'm just not surprised by people doing like people just taking advantage of the broken system rather than going out of their way to try and make the broken system actually work as a good system. And I think that that's basically what all of these MPs are doing, is just being a cog in the machine and climbing the party ladder. And there's no real value in being a good representative for your people. So, and again, that's not in the spirit of the politicians and politics in general, but it is basically what is rewarded. So I think it's just a symptom of a larger problem with our political system.
Yeah, I mean, so to be clear, the reason why I use kind of maybe like strong language, as Tristan would put it, to describe many of our politicians and ministers, is that not only do I feel like we're not putting the most competent people in these higher positions, we're actively putting like incompetent people or may I say maybe people with not the best like pure intentions in these positions, right? In these higher ranking positions. So the next kind of article maybe illustrates a little bit more of what I mean, right? So this is an article, before you guys accuse me of like, being an alt-right political like pundit, the next Alex Jones or whatever. This article came from the Globe and Mail. Okay, so I didn't take this off of like Alex Jones InfoWars. This is from the Globe and Mail, and it's from the chief Ottawa bureau chief Robert Fife, who I believe is a pretty famous reporter and respected by both sides of the aisle. So this article says that Sajan, who's our defense minister, who is Sikh himself, of the Sikh religion, right? He instructed special forces to rescue Afghan Sikhs during the fall of Kabul. So if you guys remember, when the U.S. pulled out of Afghanistan back in 2021, the Taliban moved in and quickly took over, and there was a huge, it was a bit of a mess. It was a very big mess, not a bit of a mess. It was a very big mess. And yeah, basically, people were trying to flee the Taliban as they were kind of coming in and taking over the capital city, Kabul, right? And it would appear that our defense minister kind of instructed our special forces to prioritize rescuing Sikhs above, other people. So there's a huge debate. Again, this is a sensitive topic, and there's a debate online about, whether he diverted resources that would have otherwise been used to save other people and to save Sikhs specifically, right? But regardless, it's not a good look for Sajan, right? It's for those of you who are arguing that, people are just being racist towards him because he's of Sikh Indian ethnicity, right? Change this ethnicity, change this Sikh headline into any other race, right? So if it was a white defense minister who instructs his special forces to only save white people that are fleeing Kabul, how would you think that would look, right? Or take me, right? I'm Asian and I'm of Chinese descent. Say if I was the defense minister and I instructed the Canadian special forces to prioritize saving Canadians of Chinese descent who are trying to flee Kabul, right? I'm not sure if there were any, but let's just say there were, right? How would you feel about that, right? So I think it's important to kind of reframe the question in different like kind of angles to discover whether or not you're carrying a bias or not. And I think that if, like, again, I don't have all the details, and this is just the story. I literally just read about this earlier today, so I haven't had a lot of time to digest the details of the news. But from what it appears, if the story does shake out the way it's shaking out right now, then it sounds like that there might have been some personal bias, right? Because Sajan is Sikh himself, then maybe he had a special affection for Sikh Canadians and, you know, just Sikh people in general. So yeah, I mean, how do you guys like react to this news, right? Like, so from what I can see, like my opinion is that it appears that we have a lot of these like cabinet ministers, right? Like Mark Holland or like Sajan or like all these people who have, you know, kind of who have acted in ways that aren't necessarily, you know, for the people or for the good of the country. And they're bringing a lot of these like, you know, personal biases and kind of just, you know, personal ambitions. And it's like kind of bubbling up to the surface, right? Usually this stuff is like hidden in the background. I know this stuff happens with every cabinet, whether liberal or conservative. I understand that. But the issue with this liberal cabinet in particular is that we're seeing these issues crop up for multiple ministers over and over again. And yeah, I just think that like this is a bit of an issue, right? Like, what do you guys think? Like, am I just being like a alt-right Alex Jones trying to push like an alt-right agenda, or do you think there's some merit to what I'm saying?
Like from my perspective, it does kind of seem like slightly biased. Like I think going on to the point how he's specifically Sikh and then he's trying to rescue Afghan Sikh people. Like you can't deny that those things are pretty similar to each other, and obviously there's like an agenda specifically towards it and a little bit of biasness. Like on the alternative, like maybe could have just said like save like in distress Afghanistan citizens or such matter in Kabul. But yeah, it does say Sikh. But then again, we haven't like necessarily read the whole article. Like from what we were provided here, it's just you know the tagline that could just be like pure clickbait. Who knows? But yeah, it does definitely look like a bit of biasness. It could have been like reworded a bit differently, like in a less biased manner, or you know executed overall differently. But yeah, that's how I see it so far.
Right. And again, this is why I kind of emphasize that this is an article from the Globe and Mail, right? Because like you guys wouldn't believe like a word of this headline if like I told you I grabbed it from like an alt-right source, right? Like if I grabbed it from like InfoWars or if I grabbed it from like Breitbart News or whatever, right? Like you guys would say, oh, like they're definitely trying to spin this in some like, you know, pro right-wing way. But again, this is the Globe and Mail, which I don't think is considered an alt-right publication, right? Maybe I'm wrong, but yeah, Tristan, what do you think?
Yeah, it's a little bit sus. It's a little bit suspicious. I don't think that I don't think it would go over well if it was if there was some individuals you know swapping around the you know religion, the country, anything. If you just swapped any of that stuff around, I feel like people would get really concerned. Like if you swapped it to like Catholics or something, I feel like there would be a lot of concern or you know something to that effect. So I think that it's not a particularly good look. It does show a bias being occurring. And again, you know, I haven't looked into this sufficiently to say if that is exactly what he was saying, or if he was you know suggesting pushing it in that direction for a different reason. You know, if there's, for example, like maybe if Sikhs were more likely to be harassed by the Taliban. That Kabul. This is the Taliban, right? Yeah. When they were taking over, yeah. So, it could be that something is something to that effect. In which case, you know, I can understand maybe there being more of an emphasis being placed on one group over another. You know, But again, I don't have quite all the details on this, so it does sound like they're at face value. It sounds like there's a bias. Now it's whether or not there is a reason for the bias, because a bias is not necessarily a bad thing. You know, like if we were looking at Germany in the 1940s, and you know someone was trying to smuggle out a Jewish person, you know, that would be understandable why they may be more priority than like just a random French person, right? Like, so something to that effect, right? Where there is more, maybe more risk to that individual than to a different individual. So without further information, I can't officially say that I think that what he did was wrong, but I can say that it is suspicious. It's kind of where I'm going.
Yeah, and like my point is not to pick on like Defense Minister Sajan like specifically, right? I'm just trying to make the point that there's been a lot of kind of these gaffes like for multiple ministers, right? Like we talked about Mark Holland for an episode before this episode. Remember, he was the one that made the comments about like the 10-hour road trips burning up the planet and stuff like that, right? So yeah, it seems like, you know, we knew of him before this like kind of interview he gave after the St. Paul's election, where, you know, he came off as someone who's like a very, you know, staunch liberal like ally, right? Like an ally of Trudeau who's kind of willing to defend Trudeau for everything, and, you know, willing to take maybe like more extreme positions, I would say, right? And just because, like, you know, Trudeau's for it and he's willing to jump in line for everything, right? And then if you remember before that, there was that kind of situation with the Speaker of the House being forced to resign because he brought in a Ukrainian war hero from his writing who turned out to be a Nazi. And not only was he a Nazi, he was a member of the SS, which was like kind of the elite soldiers, like death squad of the Nazi army during World War II. So that was bad enough to force the speaker to resign. So we got a new speaker, and, you know, surprise, surprise, like the speaker was a Liberal MP for that as well, right? And yeah, there's just been a lot of these kind of issues with you know, these cabinet ministers. And again, my point was that not only am I like convinced that we're not putting the best, most competent people in these high-ranking, powerful positions, we're actively putting people that are, like, you know, either completely incompetent or they're competent, but they're using their competence for, you know, ulterior reasons that kind of they don't serve the interests of the country the best, right? And that's kind of my point. And just to move on to part 3 now, because we're a little bit short on time, if you guys don't have anything to add, the issues that, like, you know, that Mark Holland was kind of responding to, that the interviewer was asking him, how, like, you know, why would people push back against the Liberals? He seemed genuinely confused on why people would push back on the Liberals. It seems like he doesn't understand that this is like a country in crisis, and the, you know, government is partially to blame, right? I'm not saying that they're to blame for everything, but let me just, in case it wasn't clear, let me just illustrate to Mark Holland, in case he's watching. I know he's not, but in case he ever watches this video, let me just illustrate to Mr. Holland the exact issues that Canadians are facing right now, and why exactly Canadians are mad at the government, right? And this is backed up with data and statistics, so I'm not just making this stuff up, right? So the first piece of news or evidence is that inflation has picked back up. So last week, we just got our new, like, the latest CPI report for May, and we were expecting to get 2.6% CPI inflation year over year. We came in with 2.9%. So it was a massive, it doesn't sound like a lot, right? Like a 0.3% difference, but like it is really a lot. and it's like a massive, higher than expected inflation report. We were expecting 2.6, and last month, before that, so April, we came in at 2.7. So we were expecting it to come down from 2.7 to 2.6. Instead, we went up from 2.7 to 2.9. So this is kind of inflation reaccelerating. This is a problem. This is also bad news for Trudeau, right? Like, I don't think there's any debate on that, right? Like, even liberal supporters will say, yeah, this is probably not good for the sitting prime minister, right? So that's issue number one that people care about, that's facing Canadians right now. Issue number two, kind of related to that, specifically with Canadian rent prices. You can see this chart that I put in. So this is a rent component of the CPI in particular. And you can see that like CPI itself, like yes, it's gone up like between April and between May, but it's like still trending downwards from the peak, right? But if you look at the Canadian rent inflation, it's not coming down, it's going up, right? And it's going up at an ever accelerating rate. And it came in at positive 8.9% in May. So this is the highest rent inflation rate since January of 1983. So yeah, it's been like 40 years, the highest. And the next kind of chart is a comparison between the rent inflation of Canada versus the US versus the UK and Australia, right? And you can see that, yes, everyone's going up, right? I'm not denying that, but Canada's going up the most. And if you look at kind of the trend at the end, or the US is coming down kind of consistently, but even for countries like the UK and Australia, who are also seeing pretty massive rent inflation, you can see kind of the trend of the Australian and the UK kind of tapering and going downwards at the very end, right? Like, it's very recent, but it is starting to kind of come down. But Canada is just keep on going up, right? Like, it doesn't show any sign of stopping. So inflation is definitely like the big issue, number one, right? And why people are mad. And number two reason why people are mad, we talked about this before as well, car thefts or just crimes in general, right? Crimes have surged in Toronto. And I read a report that the car thefts are up like, 200% something year over year. And this is a photo taken. I'm told that this is in North York. So this isn't in St. Paul's, but North York is probably, I don't know, like a 15-minute drive away from St. Paul's. It's very close to St. Paul's, which was the district that just had the by-election. So yeah, this is in North York. And this person, it would appear they booted their own car to prevent it from being stolen. Because cars are getting stolen so often that you have to attach these like little things on your car that immobilizes it. And I'm assuming that every time this person wants to go out and use his car, he has to go to each wheel and undo the boot, and then he could drive, right? So this is like, and this is a Honda CRV, I think. This is one of the most stolen cars, right? And yeah, this is kind of what people have to resort to prevent the cars from being stolen these days. So you can see that just like this is a symptom of how bad things are. And, before we talked about this before in a previous episode where we were discussing the rise in car thefts, and we were throwing out ideas, and it was like, maybe it's not completely the government's fault because like the police are short on resources. They don't get enough funding. So they and the thieves have developed new technologies maybe, or new methods. So they're becoming harder and harder to catch. So maybe that's the issue why car thefts are on the rise. But I just read a report from Global News that kind of goes into the face of that, where the story is that nearly half of the 124 people arrested by Ontario police for carjacking were out on bail. So these are repeat offenders, right? The police catches them. It's not like the police can't catch them. The police, they do arrest people, and then they just, for whatever reason, release them back into the public. And a lot of these, like even the people that are still under arrest that weren't out on bail, they were repeat offenders, right? That was kind of the second point that it didn't include in this screenshot, but like I think it was mentioned in the article as well that a lot of these people are repeat offenders. So this is not a failure of like the police, even, I would argue, right? Because the police are arresting people, I don't think it's necessarily like a failure of like not providing enough funding. Sure, like I would argue that the police probably could use a little bit more funding, and that would make their lives easier, right? But I feel that this kind of proves that this is a failure of policy, right? Like we're just like whatever it is, the criminal justice system is not working as intended, right? We are catching these people, but we're releasing them back into the public after like a week or something, right? Or after a short amount of time. And I kind of made this meme that illustrates the ridiculousness of this like idea of just like catch and release. And I'm not sure if you guys ever watch the show Friends, right? So this is like kind of the Joey learning French kind of meme. It's like, you know, he tries and he tries and he just doesn't get it, and he thinks he's doing well, but he's not, right? So this is like, you know, we need to deal with the rising car thefts in Canada. And then Joey's like, oh, we can arrest the car thieves and then release them. And then it's like, what? Like, yes, we should arrest them, but we should not release them until we can make sure that they won't commit crimes again. It's like, okay, so we arrest them and then we release them. Like, no, we arrest them and then we should prosecute them. And it's like, so I should release them. And it's like, no, I said we should arrest and prosecute. Let's release them. This is the way that our government has been dealing with this issue, right? So I got a hunch that maybe these are the reasons why Canadians are mad, and these are the reasons why the Liberals lost the election in St. Paul's. And it doesn't appear that Mark Holland or any of the, you know, Liberal cabinet ministers or Liberal politicians are getting this. And I think that there's going to be consequences if they don't wake up soon, because the election will eventually come, and it's not just going to be St. Paul's. And I think Canadians are going to bring their anger to the voting booth unless they really do something immediately to address these issues. But yeah, what do you guys think? Do you guys think that like I hit the nail on the head, or do you guys think I missed something, or like what are your opinions on the data and stuff that I just presented?
I think we covered like quite a bit, so I'll just go over it like one by one. I didn't know that Canada's inflation rose up a little bit, and then that's slightly concerning. So, in the coming times of the, you know, like federal like interest rate or cut, I would imagine they would probably pause for the time being, seeing as how like this entire situation's happening. I don't expect them to cut even more because I feel like that would make, you know, the CPI rating like even worse. So I think they might just pause for now, or even like, no, I don't know about increase. Let's just say pause. I'll say pause, I guess. And in terms of rents, that's pretty nuts how expensive Canada is in terms of rent. And then I do see it. Like I think here in Canada, specifically in Calgary, the main source of like searching for rents is you know, Rent Faster or, you know, Facebook Marketplace or Kijiji, and like I'll look on the odd case, like, and it seems pretty expensive, like to find a place even here in Calgary. Like this is even Vancouver or Toronto, so that just goes to show how much of an increase rent is going into for sure. And like compared to other countries like, you know, Australia, UK, I didn't even know the states were dropping. Like all the more reason as to why people are going to the states, but that's like another story. Anyway, and so to comment on the SUV situation too, I didn't realize it was that bad in downtown Toronto. I know people have like that, you know, like that wheel lock thingy that people put on their wheels, but I didn't know people put like, you know, blockers on their like actual like four wheels on their car. And yeah, to be fair, like I think what was it, Honda CRV, that's like a really stealable car, and as well as like RAV4. Like I think there's a few other cars that are specifically like stolen quite frequently, and I believe because of that, their insurances are a little higher. But I still think it's really insane how people lock up their cars and like forcibly like unlock them each and every time they go out just so they can have the security at night. I think something definitely has to be done for that. And in terms of like, you know, policies against like carjacking, I think yeah, the city of Toronto can probably do better, and maybe that's why like the St. Paul's incident did happen. You don't know for certain, but it could be, you know, this is happening, so this will happen in response to that. And nice little like comic there, like the comedic touch to it. And yeah, Tristan, take it away. So those are all my comments. There you go.
Yeah, so I think that the inflation issue, I think, is really the big one that people are more so concerned about, voting wise, because I think that a lot of people, well, everyone basically has to pay rent in some, either rent for like a place to live where they have to pay a mortgage or something. They have to pay for their housing no matter what. And if you own a house with a mortgage, you're paying a lot more for the mortgage because rates have been high. And if you're renting, I've been talking to some of my friends who are moving recently or planning to move, and the amount of money that the rents are in the different places that they're looking at is just so much higher than it has been in the past, and they're ridiculous. Like, for example, like one of them was looking at apartments in Ottawa, and it was like 1,600 for like a bachelor pad, where your bed was right beside the kitchen stove. You know, like to the point where if you were making some spaghetti sauce on that burner and it started splattering a little bit, you probably would hit your bed, right? So I think the fact that for example is 1,600, and even a few years ago, I remember when I rented a apartment in Mississauga, I got a 1-bedroom apartment for $750, right? And like that was like really good. But like that's just something that's like completely unheard of now at this point, right? And so I think that those are the kind of things that people are more so concerned about. The car one, I think that is more of a Toronto problem, so it may have influenced the people in the riding that I already forget the name of. What is it? Toronto Pearson or no?
St. Paul's.
St. Paul's. No, Toronto Pearson's the airport. It might have influenced them somewhat, but like car theft at least in Calgary, comparatively, it's not something you hear about all the time. Whereas I feel like in Toronto, every time I turn around, there's people talking about how their cars are being stolen. So this is not necessarily a national problem, more so than an Ontario problem, right? And to that effect, I did find the fact that the guy basically went the bike lock strategy of he's like, I'm gonna lock up my car, because don't have a bike lock, so he basically equivalent to a bike lock to lock the car to stop it from being stolen. And I mean, if it's really that prevalent, you might as well, right? I would probably do it if I was seriously concerned about it, especially if I felt that the vehicle was worth stealing.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I feel that this is like a relatively tame example of what people would do to prevent their property from being stolen, right? What I'm really afraid of is like the alternative, right? Like because these boots, like they're not 100% theft proof either, right? Like thieves have ways of getting these off if they really, really wanted to take your car. So like what's next, right? If the police are not willing to do anything, or if they just do this catch and release over and over again, then people are going to take matters into their own hands, right? And I'm talking about like vigilante justice, right? I'm not even kidding. Like people will take weapons to defend their property, and then you're going to have like just like mob fights in the streets because every time somebody approaches your driveway, you think, oh, is this guy like a car thief, right? And then crossbows are still legal in Ontario, just saying, right? Like, this could get very dangerous, and this could like escalate into like mistaking identities, right? Like, what if somebody is just trying to deliver a package, right? Like you ordered, your like son ordered DoorDash, and like you didn't know, and like the DoorDash like person looks suspicious, so you take out your crossbow. Like this kind of stuff like can happen, and this is like kind of where we're headed as a society if they don't do something about the rise in car thefts. And the boot thing, like it's kind of like a relatively tame example. This is like step one, right? And I've our mutual friend, if you guys know him, he recently told me a story of where so one of the dealers, like the car dealers that he works with at his workplace, it's a Toyota dealer in Aurora, Ontario, right? So this is like Aurora is a pretty rich neighborhood. If you guys don't know, it's like one of the more affluent neighborhoods of Ontario, and it's in the GTA, right, Greater Toronto area. And crime used to not be that big of a problem in Aurora. You could like even before you could just leave your bike like on the side of the road and like no one would take it and stuff like that, right? But car thefts are a thing in Aurora now, where like one of the dealerships that is working with, they had like a Toyota Tundra or whatever, I think it was, like one of the trucks, right? And then and then it was stolen, and the police recovered it a few days later and returned it to the dealer, and then it got stolen again. Right, so likely by the same group of people, right? Because they're like, oh, we like the dealer just took it back, and like they parked it in the exact same place that they parked it last time when we took it. Let's just go take it again. And it's just like this issue, this like catch and release is really problematic. And I know that I need to address this because we're gonna get some people in the comments being like, hey, like the OPP, the Ontario Provincial Police, they're provincial, right? This is a provincial problem. Like, why are you blaming Trudeau? Why are you blaming the feds, right? And like inflation, this is a Bank of Canada, like kind of thing. Why you're blaming Trudeau, right? It's not his fault. And listen, like when there's a will, there's a way, right? For the car thing, I know that the OPP is a provincial, organization, right? The Ontario Provincial Police, but if there's like a will to like actually try and solve this problem, you would get the RCMP involved, right? The RCMP is kind of like the FBI of Canada, right? You would get them involved, and I'm sure they're already involved in some way, but get them more involved and have a coordinated effort, right? And if it's still an issue because this is such a large issue, then maybe we should rethink about how we do policing in this country, right? Maybe we should not have like an OPP and like the Manitoba police and the Alberta police, and maybe we should just kind of give more power to the RCMP to like kind of do stuff on a national basis, right? So like I don't want people to get into this kind of mindset that rules are rules and this system that we have in place cannot be changed, because it definitely can be changed. And if it's something that's not working, then we should change it. And regarding inflation, being like, a Bank of Canada problem is not Trudeau's fault. The core of inflation is due to this exorbitant government spending that we're doing, right? So I showed the chart last week of how the public sector of employees in Canada is exploding, right? So all these like kind of government bureaucrat jobs that don't add a lot of productivity, let's just be honest, right? Not to diss on government workers, but like that's just a fact, right? Like the government work tend to be less efficient, tends to be less productive. We're adding all these like, less productive jobs, and we're exploding the amount of government spending, and we're exploding like all these like just all these programs, and we're spending like $2 billion on AI. We're raising the capital gains tax, or raising the carbon tax, we're raising the carbon tax, and then like we're spending all this money on all these programs, and that is kind of the root cause of inflation, in my opinion, right? And if you like, maybe this is a little hard to understand for people who don't really understand economics, so let me maybe just put it in a way that is simpler, right? So it's kind of like if there's only so much goods and services available in an economy, and money is kind of the medium we use to purchase, to exchange, right, for those goods and services. But if we explode the amounts of money that's out there without increasing the amount of goods and services that are available, then we're going to have a problem, right? We're going to have inflation. Now, it could be the case that we're creating some goods and services, but we're creating a lot less goods and services than the money we're creating. That also is inflation. So this is kind of the fundamental principle that I'm trying to get through to everybody's heads, is that this irresponsible government spending is really at the core of all these problems, right? And we talked about the federal budget at one episode or a couple episodes ago, where, according to the Liberals, if they were to remain in charge until 2029, I think it was, they would still be running a $20 billion deficit per year, right? Like right now, they're running a $40 billion deficit, and then they're going to run a deficit every single year, and deficit is going to get like smaller, but it's still going to be a deficit. It's not a surplus, right? So they're still, according to their best plans, they're still spending more money than the money that they're taking in. So what does that mean, right? So that means that if they try to make up the shortfall, they're going to raise taxes on everybody, right? Or it's just or they're going to have to like print the money to spend, right? And that causes inflation. So for those of you who are about to argue that it's not Trudeau's fault for inflation, it's not the Fed's Liberals' fault for all this carjacking and car thefts in Toronto, there's stuff that the Liberals can do right now because they're the party in charge. There's a stuff that the Feds can do to kind of help the situation, and they're just not doing it. So let me toss the question to you, Dom, first. What do you think about what I just said? Do you agree with what I just said, or what do you have to add? What do you have to say about all of that?
Yeah, I guess I kind of agree with you. I think if everything was like ran differently, like we wouldn't be in such predicaments and things like this. And right now, I guess Canada overall isn't doing as good as it probably should be. And there's a lot of changes that definitely need to happen, and those changes do need to happen. And the only thing we can do is just hope that all ends up well for us and stuff, like on an overall scale. And yeah, we just gotta I guess be on standby, or maybe we could do something about it. But yeah,
Tristan?
Yeah, I think the government, anyone who thinks that the government isn't causing inflation is just factually wrong. And it's not to say that the government is solely causing inflation. It's multiple things are causing inflation, but the government is definitely being a large contributor to the inflation, the rate of inflation that is currently going on. So while there are other areas that can be blamed, it's not like you can blame Loblaws all you want. It's not just Loblaws is the problem, right? So I think that's one thing to just keep in mind, is that the government, they functionally control the Bank of Canada. They by incurring deficits, they are by definition increasing inflation, because of the fact that the deficits require additional funding to be obtained. And where does that funding come from? Either through quantitative easing or debt. And that debt then has to be repaid. And it's all a whole system that is all contributing to the inflation rate of the Canadian currency. So regardless of what you think, these facts don't care about your feelings.
Perfectly put. I just gotta maybe step on the gas pedal a little because we're a little bit short on time. So if you guys are ready, let's move on to the final part of this story. And this is the last part of this particular story, I promise. Right. And this is just kind of like maybe a word of warning to everyone, to Canadians in general, that we really do need to be safeguarding our democracy, because I know like this doesn't, I'm not trying to imply that these people represent all Liberal supporters or even most Liberal supporters, but I've seen some tweets online from certain people that are Liberal supporters, let's just say, who are upset that they lost the Toronto St. Paul's by-election, that I think are pushing us down kind of a dangerous pathway, right? So what do I mean, right? Here's an example. So this is a person named Vicky Campbell, and apparently she's a Liberal supporter, right? And she tweeted after the results were announced that the Conservatives won the St. Paul's election. That she said, I hope they're keeping their eyes open yesterday for ballots arriving in trunks of cars for Toronto St. Paul's by-election. So, what she's implying here is that, like, the whole night, the Liberals were leading, right? And then all of a sudden, at the very end, the Conservatives jumped up and overtook the Liberals and won the election. So a lot of people are saying, like, hey, isn't this suspicious? So what happened, if you're willing to just, spend literally 5 minutes looking into this, is that they counted the advanced ballots at the end, right? And advanced ballots were overwhelmingly pro-conservative because the people who are super mad at Trudeau, they wanted to just cast their vote. There's nothing that Trudeau can say to like change their minds, and they just want him out. So they, like most people, they just voted in the advanced polls, who are kind of very determined to get Trudeau out of that riding. And to get the Liberals out of that riding, right? And the people who vote on election day itself, maybe they're comprised of more kind of split and swing voters, right? So that's kind of what happened, in case you were wondering. But Ms. Campbell here has, without evidence, asserted that or suggested that this election is suspicious, and like, let's look out for trunks of like fake ballots from suspicious cars arriving at the Toronto by-election polling stations. And I think this is a dangerous road to go down, right? And the second tweet is that somebody named AMC tweeted that how can Elections Canada account for their error in communicating the correct polling station info to eligible voters in Toronto St. Paul's, and the impact of their mistake that may have had on this extraordinary close race? How many incorrect mailers were sent out and not followed up on directly, and how many voters were affected? So there is actually some merit to this, where Election Canada, they did admit that some electors in Toronto St. Paul's received a voter information card with a mistake of the polling station's address. And this happened, on June 14th. So this happened maybe like a week before the election was due to take place. So they mailed out the new like correct information cards, and then they did kind of fix this mistake. But some people are arguing like, this is a week before the election, this is too late. Some people like might not have gotten the card on time, all this stuff, right? And because of this, like, if you see that comment at the end, somebody was saying like, we need to rerun the election, right? And I'm not like denying that this is like a problem if they mailed people with like information cards that had the wrong address. But first of all, they fixed this issue, right? And also, like, you could really quickly just do a Google search online and find the correct address if you like don't know the address and stuff like that, right? So I don't think that this was a large enough issue to change the outcome of the election. Maybe you guys would disagree with me here, but I think that this is just kind of like copium, to like put it bluntly. The last kind of tweet that I wanted to share was some guy named Charles, who said, odd, isn't it? The Canadian media is trying so hard to convince Canadians that they don't want Trudeau. So, what do you guys think about that one? Is the media trying to convince you that Trudeau is maybe not the best prime minister that we've ever had? Are you puppets of the media and being influenced? Or what do you guys think of any of these tweets in general?
So I'm just gonna scroll up real quick here. So I think in terms of the overall voting for like St. Paul's, Toronto, I mean, arguably maybe there were mistakes in terms of like, who received their, voting card or whatever the story may be. Like, there's like discrepancies in like the way people were supposed to be voting. I think it's kind of close, but I think seeing as how I want to say there's about like 1,000 vote like gap between conservative and liberal. That's like not a small number, not like a few hundred. That's still a pretty substantial number. And then let's say there are like a few correct votes or like correctly made votes that are made in the future. If it does happen, I don't know if that would necessarily make a difference, because I personally think Canadians are like sort of made up their mind and like want some sort of change. Um, and in terms of like the media, like trying to make us like not want Justin Trudeau, I think if you wake up every morning as a Canadian and you genuinely experience life, you can tell that there's a difference in the way life is lived in Canada compared to like being here like long ago, like maybe like 10 plus years ago, because I've been like born and raised in Canada for a pretty long time. And as of recent, a lot of things have changed in terms of like the cost of living and etc. And I guess the first person you point to because of this like situation is the leadership. So even without the media, I'm sure people are having these type of discussions and disagreements with the political system. So I'd say it's not even the media, but obviously the media may have a piece of the pie, but I think there's more elements to it. So that's just my opinion.
Yeah, and just before I pass it to you, Tristan, just to be clear, I'm not bringing these tweets up and stuff to try and like dunk on the liberals or anything like that. I'm bringing this up because I feel that the left is kind of guilty of doing the exact same things that they accuse the right of when it comes to questioning election efficacy, right? So when we saw this when Trump lost the 2020 election, where people were suggesting, like there's problems with the vote counting machines, the vote count is fake, blah blah blah, right? And then now we have liberal supporters kind of coming out of the woodwork saying that how could we have this like error that might have influenced the outcome of the election? We should maybe rerun the election, and they would not be saying this if they won the election. By the way, right? I guarantee you that. And then we have people suggesting like let's try and look out for suspicious cars arriving with trunks full of ballots and stuff like that, right? And this stuff is dangerous because it subverts our democratic system, right? So when we have people that from left or right that don't trust our electoral system anymore, where if somebody wins an election, we could say, oh, like they must have cheated, right? There's no way that they won, like, and we lost, like they must have cheated. So I'm not gonna admit that they won. Like that's a big problem in a democratic society, right? So let me toss it to you, Tristan. What do you think of what I just said and what all these tweets were saying?
Yeah, I think the tweets were just classic. My team lost and I'm mad about it, which was the vibe that I got, it's the same vibe as when Trump lost, as Andy, you were saying, where it was like, "Ooh, I lost, boo-hoo, I'm so mad, I'm so sad. I'm going to claim that the ballots were faked and everything, and it's all fake, and, this election is false. Because I lost, obviously there's no way I could have lost without it being a fraudulent excursion. So I think it's just, very hypocritical of the left to go, throwing it after criticizing the right for doing the same thing, and then they're coming here and like, oh, it's all fake, blah blah blah. So again, I'm not saying that there wasn't voter fraud. I'm just saying that them calling them out the same way as the right did is not really a great look. And the Elections Canada replacement cards thing is like, I feel like it's a classic incompetence factor. I feel like every year there's at least one voter incompetence card somewhere along the way. And I don't think that it's necessarily intentional. It's just like incompetence. So and the whole Canadian media trying to convince Canadians they don't want Trudeau. The Canadian media is trying to convince us we don't want Trudeau. It's trying to convince us we don't want Pierre. It's trying to convince us we don't want Jagmeet. The Canadian media is just loves negativity, and I feel like that doesn't necessarily. It's not necessarily just a Canadian media factor. It's just all media in general, because negativity does really well. No one wants to read about look at this cute beaver picture, right? You know, that cute beaver that is very cute and very great will get less clicks than Trudeau has destroyed Canada, blah 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 blah, right? Particularly if it's a news entity, right? So I just don't think I don't think the Canadian media is doing anything differently than what it has done in the past and what it continues to do now.
Yeah, great points. Great points. Yeah, I don't really have anything to add to that. And why don't we finally move on? I think that's quite enough politics for today, if I do say so myself. We do have one more story that we'll try to quickly get through because we are, again, running a little short on time. So there's just one more story. So bear with us here. The last story of tonight is Dell and the Bitcoin Treasury strategy. So we're shifting gears to economic news now. So in case you guys don't know what the MicroStrategy Bitcoin Treasury strategy is, I put up this great chart. I did not make this chart. I stole it off of Twitter. But I think it does a really good job of kind of illustrating what exactly is the MicroStrategy strategy. Right. So what MicroStrategy is a company run by Michael Saylor, by the way. Right. So what Saylor did was he found this way to kind of quickly leverage Bitcoin to increase the value of any company. And there's nothing unique about MicroStrategy ability to do this other than Saylor being kind of the visionary that he is to try and like do this and implement the Bitcoin strategy. And what Saylor has done is that you take any stock, right? So in this case, MicroStrategy, and you issue a bunch of debt. In this case, I think he was mostly using convertible notes, which are kind of like a call option and a bond wrapped together. But anyways, it's debt, right? So you issue a bunch of debt, and then you use the debt, the money that you got from selling the bonds, to buy Bitcoin, right? And if you're right, and if you're bullish on Bitcoin, which I assume all of us here are, Bitcoin will increase in price, right? Because you're holding the Bitcoin on your balance sheet. That means your stock price also increases. So when your stock price increases, then your weight in the indices increase, and you might get selected for to be included in indices like index funds and stuff like that, right? So that's one factor. But then also another factor of when your stock goes up is that you're able to issue equity. You're able to use that like ATM, right, at the market equity program to kind of sell more shares. And yes, it is dilutive in the short term, but you're increasing, you're raising all this money, and then you're using all this raised money to buy more Bitcoin. And assuming that Bitcoin keeps on going up in value, then that means that your stock price keeps on going up. And then that will enable you to increase to raise even more money so you can do more equity, right? Or issue more debt. And then you buy Bitcoin again. And then you just kind of rinse and repeat this cycle. And this is what Michael Saylor has done. If you look at a chart of MicroStrategy's stock price, it went from $100 or something before he implemented the Bitcoin strategy to now it's I don't know, 1,400 or something like that. So yeah, it's gone up more than 10x since he implemented the Bitcoin strategy back in 2020. So this is kind of the playbook, the Michael Saylor playbook. And the rumor now is that Michael Dell, who is another Michael, right? Don't know what is it about Michaels and Bitcoin, but Michael Dell is the founder of Dell Computers. And a lot of people don't know this actually, but Michael Dell is actually one of the most one of the richest men in the world. He's worth $109 billion. So his personal net worth is actually more than the entire company of Dell, which is publicly traded, by the way. I think last time I checked, they were just under $100 billion in market cap. But Michael Dell's personal wealth is even greater than that. And it appears that maybe Dell and Saylor have had a conversation where Saylor is trying to orange pill him, and maybe he succeeded because Michael Dell tweeted, "Scarcity creates value," and that's kind of like one of the slogans of the Bitcoin community, I guess you could say. And then Saylor responded to it, being like, "Bitcoin is digital scarcity," and then Michael Dell retweeted that reply. And then this is an analyst kind of breaking down what potentially it means. So Michael Dell also, besides that, he also tweeted this kind of picture of the Cookie Monster. Except instead of cookies, it's Bitcoins. It's like an AI, I guess, generated image. And then he said, "This is a great account to follow," like blah, 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 right? But many have kind of maybe delved a little bit deeper and trying to analyze what this tweet means. And apparently, according to Mark Harvey, this Cookie Monster BTC meme makes sense. Dell has about $6 billion in cash and $103 billion in market cap. If Dell were to implement a Bitcoin Treasury strategy, it would be by far the largest corporation to do so. And as a co-founder, as a founder CEO-led company, Dell has the visionary leadership required to make this happen. So this is kind of the story. And the question is, do you think that Dell will adopt the Bitcoin strategy? And what do you think about the Bitcoin strategy in general? Do you think it's a good strategy? Do you think that more companies are going to use it in the future, or just kind of your thoughts about anything I've said in general? So take it away, guys.
So I'll take it away. So I think overall he does seem pretty bullish on the idea of Bitcoin, because if he tweets like scarcity creates value, which is like, a slogan, so to speak, for Bitcoin, I guess the Bitcoin community, from what you guys are saying, I think he probably is bullish on Bitcoin and would inevitably, you know, do the whole entire Bitcoin this like process here that will happen. And I could probably see happening. I think retweeting this me cookie monster, or like kind of like showcasing, is pretty funny in a sense too. And I think it'd be pretty interesting because Dell's like a really huge company, and then as you were mentioning before, Michael Dell has an extremely large net worth in general. So if he's grabbing a piece of the pie, I think that it'd be really cool actually. And then in terms of like other companies adapting it, um, maybe perhaps, because there's all on the flip side, there's a lot of companies who have CEOs who are quite boomers. So I don't know if they would necessarily, but I think with more knowledge, they may get inspired, influenced to see the value in Bitcoin, which we all personally do see here. So I think only time will tell. And as of right now, I think he does seem pretty bullish, and he may do something about it, like how Sailor has done something about it too as well. So yeah.
I sincerely doubt that Dell, the company, will go and use the Bitcoin Treasury strategy, because one of the big factors for that is its size. Because at this point, in order to get your shareholders on board with the Bitcoin Treasury strategy, you would need a lot to get a lot of shareholders on side. So that's a lot of people to convince that Bitcoin is the future, that may not believe Bitcoin is the future. And so I think that the likelihood that he actually tries it for the company itself is pretty slim. And I mean, maybe he's got a large enough ownership himself that he could just do it. But again, I'm not fully aware of that portion of his portfolio. So in that regard, I wouldn't be surprised if Michael Dell decides to purchase some Bitcoin, or a lot of Bitcoin, with some of his riches. But I don't think that the company itself is going to go into the Bitcoin Treasury strategy. I think it was much easier for Michael Saylor to do it with MicroStrategy, because MicroStrategy was considerably smaller, which meant that the number of shareholders that he needed to convince was significantly smaller. And I mean, even if you can show MicroStrategy as a win case, it doesn't really change anything if the majority of the people just don't believe in Bitcoin itself in general, right? So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, so maybe just to provide a little bit more context on that, I don't know how much Dell shares that Michael Dell still controls. It is a publicly traded company, so obviously he doesn't control all of the shares, but I don't know if it's above 50% or less than 50%. If it's above 50%, then I think he could still push through the strategy, right? Because on most things, you only need 50% control. And, even if he doesn't have 50%, then maybe a few insiders would have, like, he has, maybe some co founders or some executives that he could uh, convince that would hold a significant portion of the shares, right? But I do know what Michael Saylor did, right? So, first of all, I think Saylor did control over 50% of MicroStrategy shares when he had decided to adopt the treasury strategy. But even then, like you said, Tristan, it's like you have to convince like a lot of the shareholders who may not be believers in Bitcoin to kind of go along with it, right? And uh, believe it or not, MicroStrategy, before they became a Bitcoin company, they made software, and they in fact still make software that nobody cares about because they've become a Bitcoin company. But back when it was a software company, yeah, it was indeed a concern that, like, if Saylor was saying that, if you were to do this, then maybe people won't be on board. So what Saylor did was he had kind of like a tender offer, what he called it. So, or what it's called in general, which is just when the company makes a price, proposes a price to buy back the shares at a certain price. So if you had shares in the company, you could sell it back to MicroStrategy, and the tendered offer price was higher than what the market price is at that moment when they announced it. So that's kind of what Saylor did, and like everyone who didn't want to be on board with the Bitcoin strategy could sell their shares at the tendered price and then get out of the company at a profit. So that was kind of a compromise that Saylor did, and it's like, if you decide to hold your shares and stay, well, those people by now they're like ascended into a higher plane of existence. MicroStrategy just went completely parabolic, right? So I think, yeah, maybe like a lot of the people who left probably decided to or probably regretted their decision, if I were to guess. But that's kind of like how Saylor dealt with the kind of getting shareholders on board part, if that's the big concern. And regarding the size of the company, like you said, yeah, I mean, maybe that is a factor, but I think maybe a bigger factor is, again, like I said, the percentage of the company, like Michael Dell or whoever controls, right? Whoever wants to get on board with this strategy. Yeah, I think Tesla kind of maybe started to adopt this strategy back in 2021, although they didn't go all in with it like Saylor did, right? But they did add Bitcoin to their balance sheet in 2021. And I believe that Tesla back then was like a $400 billion company, even back in 2021. So it's like 4 times the size of Dell now. So yeah, I mean, it could be done with a large company, I think. But the size isn't really like a barrier, I would say, but it would definitely make waves, I think, in the finance world if we got a company like Dell to adopt the Bitcoin strategy. But yeah, anyways, let me pass it to you guys if you guys have any thoughts. Or if not, we have gone on for a long time, so maybe we could wrap up the show soon. But yeah, Tristan, you were gonna say something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that it looks like Michael Dell was selling a lot of his own shares.
Mm.
So it's possible that one of two things is happening. He is just getting some money, or maybe he is getting some money to fund some Bitcoin purchases. Just saying, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah,
But
actually, there's an account that we don't know who it is that's been buying Bitcoin, like 100 Bitcoin at a time and multiple times a day, sometimes for like weeks on end, right? Like they would buy 100 Bitcoin every hour for like 8 hours, and then they would stop, and then the next day they would do it again, and they would do that every day for like a week, and then stop, right? And then like a couple of weeks would pass, and then they would start again. And this
Mhm.
person or entity or whatever, it could be a company, is called online. It's been dubbed Mr. 100, and maybe the rumor is that Michael Dell is Mr. 100, but it does seem like it's a lot even for Michael Dell, but who knows, right? Like,
Yeah, he was buying since like March, or at least he was selling his shares since like March.
Yeah, you were saying Michael Dell was selling his shares, or
Yep.
Mr. 100 was buying Bitcoin?
I was saying Michael Dell was selling his shares since March. So
yeah, I don't remember when was the first purchase known by Mr. 100, but I mean, maybe the timelines match up, maybe they don't, but it definitely seems like whoever this Mr. 100 is, if it's not Michael Dell, they're like still stacking Bitcoin to this day, right? Every dip, they're just buying 100 at a time, like every hour for like 8 hours. It's kind of nuts. But yeah, Dom, do you have anything you wanted to add? No, you're good. Okay, so if there's nothing else, why don't we end the show for tonight? Because we have gone on for a long time. So let me toss it to Dom for the outro.
Alrighty, guys. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's podcast. As per usual, leave a like, comment, and subscribe to our main channel, as well as our Clips channel and all of our personal channels. And with that being said, peace out.
Have a good one.
thanks for watching. See you next time.